Hello and welcome to IASPrimers. In this video, we'll be talking about a very significant topic of the low representation of women in India's politics. Now, this is quite significant because even though it is such an important topic, but not much attention has been given to it in public discourse. And better representation of women in politics is considered as a significant instrument for women empowerment. So when we talk about women empowerment, there are basically three L's, learning, labor, and leadership. So it is leadership that we are focusing upon in addressing women empowerment. And in terms of this, what better in democratic polity like ours, where women have a greater say in the political life? Because it is the politicians who influence the conduct of the society. They are the ones who are called the social leaders. They are the ones who make laws and influence policies. And they are the ones who are ultimately the head of the government, political executive. So for women to have greater say in the political activities is going to pave way for a more inclusive and equitable society. And in this particular video that we are going to do, we are going to cover the need for women in politics, facts and figures associated. Basically, we have a poor participation of women in politics. So what are the reasons for that? Then we'll discuss this. And lastly, what corrective measures are required. Now, when we talk about the issue of inequity in a society, it is basically patriarchy, where the male is advantaged vis-a-vis the female. And the problem is not on the basis of capability, when differentiation is made that one is more capable than the other, but it is because of one's gender. So on one's gender, one's employment, one's right to employment is given, while the other person is denied. And likewise, one is disadvantaged in the field of education, healthcare, etc., while the boy is preferred. Now, to address this crisis, we need to have a political leadership. And if we have more representation of women in politics, they are going to address this notion of patriarchy, which is deeply engraved in a society. So we need more representation of women in politics. Now, coming to patriarchy, we can see various issues which affects the country, as a society, and how if we had more women could have addressed this. So first is women's safety. Some may say that equality should have been given, but I feel women's safety because that is the first concern here. Women's safety can be an indicator which shows how we treat a woman. And we have cases of higher incidents of crime against the women. So in terms of rape, domestic violence and marital rape, that means a woman is not safe, not even on the streets, but also not safe inside the house. So that is a matter of concern over here. And look at the graph that over here which shows the rising incidence of crime. So this means that the society is not adequately sensitive to the issue of crime. It is increasing, especially given the high rate of the incidents of Nirbhaya case that had taken place, where there was a lot of public outcry. But still the crime rate is actually increasing at a very rapid pace. So that means the society is insensitive. That means the political class is not doing much about it, because political class is making laws and they are also governing the country. So administration is not doing adequate. So there needs to be more sensitivity on this issue. And that sensitivity, the best way could be by having more women in the field of politics. So politics, more women are required. What we really see in the present time is insensitivity. This is one case of a former chief minister who said on the issue of rape which had taken place in its state, that he said, why should there be capital punishment for rape? It was just a mistake that boys have made. So you see how such a serious crime has been normalized. So it shows a lack of sympathy, empathy for the woman. And if he's the chief minister, imagine how this administration would be functioning. if that is the viewpoint of the top person. So insensitivity. We also have the cases of higher or poor conviction rates, which is nothing but a symptom of how the society considers the issue of crime against the women. Next, coming to the issues associated with women's safety is the freedom to movement restrictions it causes. It causes shortage of opportunities, occupation, etc. Because the women are not, there is a concern in the house that women will not be safe when they go out on the streets. So even to go to the market, a male member is normally accompanying, or there are restrictions on the timings. So this affects not just the movement but also occupation and better opportunities for life. They are denied because of the notion of patriarchy. Next is equality. Equality, which means again, that is again at the root of patriarchal problems. So equality where the woman is disadvantaged, male is given preference. So let us see in that field of education, what we see is that even though at present we have almost universal enrollment rate, that is 100% boys and girls are getting admission, but what we really see is that there is higher dropout rates amongst the girls, and this can be explained for the higher burden of the higher burden that the woman has of doing the household work as compared to the boys, and the family wants to invest more in the boys vis-a-vis the girl. So this again shows a patriarchal problem over here, and if there is greater sensitivity which flows from the top, so women in politics, that issue can be addressed. Now because of education, we also see issues with employment, and in terms of employment, one more thing to be concerned about is that the women do not rise up the ranks as compared to the men. So at the higher position, it is normally the women, normally the men, and women are at the lower positions. So this is again a matter of concern, because that means that even the workplace that a person is functioning, the women's rights may not be, will not be committed. So in this regard, we can talk about the issue of sexual harassment at workplace. So there was a law that was passed as per which the companies are required to have certain protocols, but those protocols are not being met. So if there is an incidence of crime, the woman is disadvantaged. So in this regard, we can consider the cases of Terry. We can consider the case of Tarun Tejpal case that has recently taken place. So you can read on this. Next is the issue of gender pay gap. The concept basically says that for the same employment, the men is paid higher vis-a-vis the female. So this is again a concern which shows that preference is given to whom. It's quite obvious. And lastly, something not quite visible, but it is there. So in terms of access to healthcare, nutrition, etc., we find that the female is not given that preference. You can consider the case of in the case of vaccination drives that is taking place due to the COVID. So we are seeing that higher incidence of vaccination is for the men. So females are again they are being dropped out for certain concerns or the other. So more preference is given to the men as compared to the female at the household level only. And likewise in the case of nutrition, where the boy is given a better diet as compared to the girl. So this again shows a lack of sensitivity, and ultimately whatever we have to do, if the leadership is able to sensitize, if it is able to change the way the society thinks. The one example is Bharat Beti Bachao Beti Padhao. So how that simple slogan itself could make a change. Imagine if there are more women in the field of politics, how this could change. Then one more concept here is the double burden. This is a new emerging concept because especially in the middle class urban population, which is required where both men and women are required to work. So the woman is required to work as well. She is because of the patriarchy, it is her responsibility to take care of the household. So care activities, taking care of the child, taking care of the elderlies in the family, all of this is the responsibility of women. So the concept of shared responsibility is yet not seen in our society. It is not so evident. So that needs to be addressed. And with reference to this, there was this Maternity Act that was passed. I'm just giving it with reference to the political mindset of a country. So Maternity Act was passed, which was a good initiative in the sense that it gives women maternity leaves when pregnancies take place, and private companies compensated for that. But then it does not have the provision of paternity, that is the men or the father also gets the leaves during the time of pregnancy as well as post-pregnancy. So men are not given. So it goes to show the mindset of the government itself, which sees that the responsibility of childbearing is the sole responsibility of the woman, while paternity is not given that emphasis. So this is again a concern where we can see that how the patriarchal mindset of the male dominance in the political leadership affects. Then there are certain other points like digital gender divide, more participation of women in informal work, and instability. So men are getting more representation in formal employment where the rights of the workforce is guaranteed, but for women it is disadvantaged. Then period poverty and stigma. Women menstruate, women have periods, and during this time the traditional mindset is that they are impure. Many places they are, during this time the girl has to live in a different place also, in a more conservative system, so living in a different place. So this is again a notion which is a matter of concern which needs to be addressed, which requires greater sensitivity. So for this, a movie was also released, that is Padman, right? So that this issue needs sensitivity, and again we need more role of women in the position of leadership to address this. Then underrepresentation of women as leaders in health. So these are certain other issues. Now coming to the women in politics, or the key trends that are there. So firstly, when we talk about the politics, we have to talk from the perspective of the parliament. And in the parliament, it is the Lok Sabha in which the members are directly elected. So here what we have seen is that representation is, presently it has 11 to 14%. The present Lok Sabha is at 14%. Now this is a much better figure as compared to the earlier of the last decade, which was around 7 to 8%. But still, 14% is nothing compared to the population of women, which is around 50%. Right? It is common sense. Half of the population is women. So half of the population is not getting representation, only 14% is given. And if we look at the region wise, right, this was a pan-India figure where certain states fare better than the others. So states, especially in the heartland where there is more conservativeness, there we see that the women's representation is much lower. So this needs to be rectified. Then talking about the state assemblies, state's legislative assembly. Here the participation or the representation of women is much poorer. Presently it is at 8.4%. We have this data only. This is from Election Commission of India's data. So it is increasing for sure. The rate is increasing, but then it is not adequate enough. And lastly, it is the local bodies. Local bodies are the third tier of the democracy of the government. So the local bodies are of two types. So one is the panchayats and other is the urban local bodies. So in these local bodies, there is a law. There was a law that was created by the 73rd and 74th Amendment, as per which 33% of the panchayatis, or in the case of urban local bodies, the municipal commissioner, etc., all those people were to be reserved. And likewise, the post like the panchayat, the head of the panchayat, zilla panchayat, all of them was to be reserved for the women, 33%, same ratio. So in this case, we see a trend that there is a higher representation. In fact, in certain states, it is also exceeded 50%. So from 33 to 50%. So at the level of local bodies, we see a much better trend, while at this level of parliament, we see at a much poorer performance. So maybe there is a case to have a women reservation bill in the elections of the parliament and the state assemblies. And when we talk about the women in politics, naturally our focus is on representation, but we also need to look at the participation of women in political activities. So here we see that it is more or less equal. So it was 65% in the recent Lok Sabha elections, and male was 67%, which is a good sign. Now coming to structural barriers to participation of women in politics. So structural barriers, first one is patriarchy itself, that is gender defined roles. So men, minister, he'll be able to take charge, he's strong, women are weak, that mindset basically. Second is the perception that men will fare better in elections. Now because of this perception, there is more nomination that is given to men as compared to female. Then lack of access to financing. Elections, we all know that political parties give out money like anything when elections are taking place for campaigning and so many other activities. Women are struggling to find access to financing as compared to the men. And in this reference, we find that there is weaker professional networks amongst the women. So in terms of financing, in terms of the political activities that are to take place, or the awareness of the corporates who can give money, all of that. So all of this requires professional network where the women are lagging behind. And then the last point, that is the concerns of outside responsibilities. Remember, the women have the double burden. She is also answerable to the house, the household care. So work environment which is lengthy, which is strenuous, right? Unpredictable working conditions that are not suitable when she has double commitments of taking care of the child, taking care of the family and the outside world, political activities. So this is also a concern over here and which needs to be addressed. Now coming to the way forward, they are simple. The simple way would be to have reservation. Simple. Have reservation just as it is done in the local bodies. Simple. So in this regard, there was a bill also passed that was known as the Women Reservation Bill, which proposed a 33% reservation for women. Now already we have reservation for the scheduled caste. So the same can be done for women. For example, the entire population of the reserved seats also scheduled caste, as well as the general seats, the 33% is reserved. So that can be done. But then when we do this, there is a concern that it undermines the principles of democracy. Think about it, that the person, right, the constituency sends a particular person to the parliament. So the constituency will have to choose from a woman itself. Maybe the woman is not the best candidate. Maybe a constituency has one specific preference, but because of the reservation, when reservation is taking place, it is rotated amongst various constituencies. So a particular candidate would have to forfeit his seat, because the next time elections take place, it will be given to the woman. So this is again a drawback. There is a concern which undermines democracy. So reservation is certainly a way forward, but then we can also look at alternatives. So one was statutory quotas, mean having reservation by law. Other thing could be rectifying the problem. So that is to address the structural barriers to participation of women. So this is the second point, addressing this. So in some cases, there is the political parties which have taken initiative of having voluntary measures for higher nominations. So this can be done. In fact, there is a political party in Tamil Nadu which during the Lok Sabha elections, in Lok Sabha there are 40 seats in the state of Tamil Nadu, so 50% of the nomination was given to women. So like this, maybe the Election Commission of India can try to persuade the other political parties or all political parties to have higher representation of women in the political spectrum. So that can be done. So Election Commission of India playing a proactive approach role over here. Next thing could be done is to have a carrot and stick policy. In fact, these are some things that internationally it has been done. Carrot means to have an incentive and stick means to have a disincentive. So what was done in Georgia, where the political parties, if they had at least 30% of its either gender, 30% representation, men or women, then in that case they would get 30% of supplemental budget from the state. So the state will give, of whatever the budget was there of that election, 30% would be compensated by the government directly. But provided that of the, let's say these are the entire nominations, so of this 30% will be of both genders should be there. It implies that there should be 30% of women, but it is not said outrightly. So this is again good in the sense that this is a gender neutral approach, where gender is not specified. So it's not like men is disadvantaged vis-a-vis female. And here the political parties is given freedom as to how they want to give the seats. So this is a carrot policy or giving incentive. In Ireland, what they are doing is, if the political parties, in Ireland, what is happening is, if let's say out of the total representation, if 30% is not any gender, if any gender gets less than 30%, then in that case their state funding will be taken away. So they will lose 50% of the funding. So which is again a good innovative approach. Maybe in Ireland this is significant because their state funding of elections takes place. In India it does not take place. So again, with reference to state funding, there have been recommendations about the government financing the election campaigns. Then in Nigeria, what has been done is that to encourage more women participating in the elections, when anybody files a nomination for elections, then they have to pay a fees. That is true for India also. So if they lose by a very big margin, then their money is forfeited. But to encourage more women to participate, they are reimbursed. They are reducing the non-refundable nomination fees. Then one proposal that is in India's context only, with reference to the women reservation bill. When the discussion was going on, so one of the proposal was made was that, let's say this is the constituency, So let's say there is one constituency per, every seat elects one person to every constituency sends one person to the parliament. So this is a parliament or a state assembly. So it is saying that there could be both men and female who would be sent to the parliament. So certain constituencies can have 2 membership. So that was a proposal that was made. And then one of the problems with respect to participation of women is lack of awareness as to about how the governance functions. So in this reference, the UN Women, so it has taken this initiative of training women candidates on local governance. So this is one more proposal that has been made. So this has been applicable in Tunisia. So these are certain steps or initiatives that the government of India, or through Election Commission of India, it can incorporate and have a more equitable political structure. So this points that we have just discussed concludes our video today, right? So we have learned about the participation of women in politics and from a multi-stakeholder perspective. So this is all we have in this particular video. Thank you for streaming in. to IASPrimers. You're watching this with me, Shubhashish Singh Rehal. Bye bye, take care, and all the best.